Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room. Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
I want to thank the people at America's Voice.news, the streaming service, now Dish Channel 219, and Newsmax TV for helping us put on these, in the John Frederick's Radio Network, everybody for helping us put on these specials. The Committee on the Present Danger of China, the Chinese Communist Party's war against the Chinese people, the American citizens, and mankind. We're now into our fourth hour. We're going to go through 6 hours of this throughout the week of these specials. Now joined by Kevin Freeman. Kevin's president of the National Security Investment Consultants Institute. He's also a certified financial advisor and host of Economic War Room with Kevin Freeman, now on Blaze TV. The guys over with Glenn Beck, terrific job, great show. And Kevin, the reason that you're unique among the other folks we talked to in this area, you've actually put forward this concept of economic warfare as kind of a discipline and an approach to warfare. You know, in unrestricted warfare, that was written in the mid-'90s, came out in the late '90s, the war plan of the PLA and the CCP against the West. The two colonels at the time of the PLA said, hey, there's information/cyber warfare, there's economic warfare, and they're kinetic. We never want to fight the foreign devils in a kinetic war because we can destroy them through information war and economic war. You've been at the tip of this spear for many, many, many years. Walk us through, in your mind, what economic warfare is and how is the Chinese Communist Party fighting that war against the West?
Well, Steve, I first looked at this in 2008. I noticed unusual trading activity. I mentioned it to friends in the Pentagon. They immediately sponsored me for a report, which I did for the Pentagon, that showed that you could take down America by taking down our stock market. And, you know, unfortunately, nobody wanted to talk about that at the time. I did further research, discovered the same book, Unrestricted Warfare. I've been an avid reader of it for over 10 years. I've studied it. I've talked to as many people as I can about it. I even showed it to a former director of the CIA, and they said, I've never heard of this. Why haven't I seen this? And yet the copy that we have was spirited out of the PLA bookstore in Beijing, translated by the CIA. Basically, economic warfare is you take down your enemy without firing a shot. You destroy their economy so they become dependent on you. And the Chinese have been pulling it off since 1999. They've stolen our intellectual property. They've moved our industries to China where they have control. They have violated trade practices, everything you can do with the currency, making the currency too weak, making the currency too strong. And now they're targeting us for a kill shot. And this virus gives them that opportunity.
People's, you know, one of the things we're doing, you see this in the polling, we're adamantly banging this drum every day. We've done it for the last couple of years, but most of the country is now just coming to this, and they're, quote unquote, you know, they're woke. The first question they're going to have is, how come I've never heard of this in the last 20 years? Why is it guys like Kevin Freeman on Blaze or Steve Bannon at Breitbart or these other guys I don't see this on the main business papers. I don't see this in the New York Times business section. I don't see this on the CNN. I don't see this on the shows that deal with business or the Sunday talk shows. Why are we finding out about this in April of 2020?
Well, the people that would tell you, the elitists, have either been co-opted, meaning they've been bought off, and they regularly have. I'll tell you a quick story on that. I was at the Heritage Foundation. I gave a talk on this with my second book, Game Plan. And afterwards, a woman walks up to me. She's obviously Chinese. She introduces herself. She hands me her business card. She's at one of the major universities there. I look at it politely. I look at her, and I said, "You're PLA, aren't you? People's Liberation Army of China." And she smiles. I caught her off guard, and she says, "Yes." And she bows her head and says, "Yes." I said, "Okay, now you know, I know you're PLA. And did I say anything that was wrong?" And she said, "No, everything you said is true." And I said, "Okay, well, if it's all true and you're doing all of these things, are you going to whack me? Is the PLA going to come after me?" And she said, "Oh, no." I said, "Why not?" She said, "We own half this town." So I asked who owns the other half, and she said the Saudis. But that was brutal honesty. They bought off. And the other side is they're ignorant. People don't want to see. They don't want to know. They buried their head in the sand. And they always say, "Well, China owes us. We owe China a lot of money. Why would they ever hurt us?" I said, "Read the book. If you read the book, you'll understand.
Do you believe our elites? I want to go back to, because you're one of the first ones to kind of identify this. The Chinese, the way they think of the world is that they're the middle kingdom. They're the that part between earth and heaven, and they look at the way they look at the world as everybody else is a tributary state. Are we in the United States today a tributary state to the Chinese Communist Party, and have our elites been bought off?
Well, in some ways, voluntarily we are. We don't have to be. Our economy is better, stronger. They don't function effectively without us. If we were to wake up everybody right now and bring back the pharmaceutical supply chain, bring back the manufacturing, not let them continue to cheat on trade, intellectual property theft, manipulate currencies, and so forth. We have a chance that we can wake up and escape from this. I think we're kind of more like the people asleep in the Matrix, hooked up to the machine. Once we wake up from it, we can get away from it. But people need to wake up.
What now, if you were advising the president today, walk us through, like Roger Robinson, we just had him on. He was Reagan's economic warfare advisor. If you were with Brian and Pottinger, the National Security Council, you're advising the president, walk him through the framework that you look at things, and what would be the 2 or 3 things you would tell him, Mr. President, I think we need to do these today?
Well, the immediate thing is, and I just did a show of this, it releases today on economicwarroom.com, which is on the farm issue. I mean, because we've shut down our economy, we put our farmers at risk. And our farm at risk means the world's food supply is at risk. So, immediately we need to open on a county by county basis. We helped create a tool with a company called Navigo. It's patriotic engineers did an incredible tool. They looked at every county in America in the midst of the coronavirus, and they found those counties that were safe to open immediately. In fact, we would save more lives opening that county now than keeping it shut down. And he should look at that tool instantly, and we ought to immediately get our economy back to work. The problem is we're in an economic war, and we've told our economy to stand down. That's crazy. How can you fight an economic war if you tell your economy to stand down? So that'd be the first thing I'd say. Absolutely, we have to do that.
You're saying we have to open up and fight on the agriculture side. The trade deal is, the president keeps defending the trade deal, and it's obviously the first step of really us standing up for ourselves as far as the trade war goes. But do you think that's a little bit been overcome by events, and he ought to focus on more of the big issues in capital markets and currency that they're currently attacking us on?
Well, the first thing on the trade deal is that China's not going to keep this. It is not in their nature to keep it. They'll say a pandemic makes it impossible for them to fulfill their part, and that's where they're probably headed. On the currencies, our currency's at risk, and right now the Chinese are creating a cryptocurrency, their own version of it. Their intention, phase 3, I called it in my book 12 years ago when I wrote this. Phase 3 is you just destroy or debase the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency of the world. And it won't happen so dramatically that people just say, oh, they're doing this to us. Instead, it's going to be the International Monetary Fund. It's going to be the World Bank. It's going to be China and Russia and a few allies. And then the Europeans come alongside and say, it's ridiculous that the dollar is the sole primary reserve currency of the world. We ought to have a basket of currencies, maybe the SDRs, and they'll ask for the Chinese currency to be included among it. So it looks like it's a gradual effect. But that's happening right now because they want to remove our ability to fight this economic war. The Chinese coronavirus takes down our economy. You tell them to stand down, and you remove the U.S. dollar as the primary reserve currency of the world, and basically it's over in that fight.
Kevin, I want to be very specific here for our audience because we're trying to coach people up. And we have a lot of hedge fund people and a lot of the news producers, all the shows listen. But we're principally here for the deplorables. Talk to people. We got a couple of minutes left, like 3 minutes. Walk people through what is the prime reserve currency, why we are the prime reserve currency, and why it makes a difference in their life as a working class and middle class citizen of the United States of America.
Well, first, let me say that China is not in a position to replace the US dollar today, probably not a month from now or a year from now, but they are in a position to force the international institutions to say, when I trade for goods and services between two nations, let's say an African nation and Russia or China or India, why do we have to use a US dollar to do that? We should trade in our own currency, or better yet, a global currency. And so the push is they want to make international trade done in different currencies other than primarily the US dollar. Why that matters to us is we have a $25 trillion debt right now, and part of it, a good part of it, is financed by foreigners. And the only reason that foreigners want to hold our debt is they think that it's a solid currency that is used for international trade. Now, with oil prices down, people aren't trading much oil. And because of that, the demand for dollars is going down. Right now, the demand for dollars is good. But when we get past this crisis, the Chinese are going to push no longer use dollars. And if they succeed, what happens is we're going to find it hard to sell our debt overseas. And if we can't sell our debt overseas, the only thing we can do is sell it to the American people or monetize it through the Federal Reserve. That's how countries get into hyperinflation. That's how currencies get destroyed.
Are we? Could we become Argentina if we allow the dollar not to be the prime reserve currency?
You know, we head that direction. It is possible we become Zimbabwe, Argentina, Venezuela, Weimar Germany. If we print money and spend money and increase our debt, rack up the massive debts like we're doing, and we don't have the tax revenues to offset it, we either have to raise taxes dramatically, which crushes the economy, or we have to print the money. And if we print the money, yes, that is how great nations' currencies fail, is they print the money, and that if it's not the reserve currency, nobody's out there outside of the country looking for it. So you're just printing money, and it becomes eventually worthless.
We got about a minute left, Kevin, before we talk about your books and how to get access to you. But as you look at this, we've hit for liquidity, used essentially a $6 trillion liquidity bazooka at the Federal Reserve. We've kind of merged Treasury and the Federal Reserve together. What kind of concerns do you have that this quantitative easing, this massive quantitative easing, is just blowing up the balance sheet of the United States of America?
Well, it's absolutely blowing up the balance sheet. Here's the reality. Our economy produces about $5.5 trillion a quarter. The government broke that with the stand down, shut down, quarantine, and so forth. And understandably, I get the reasons behind it, but they have to fill that hole. If you break it, you buy it. So the government's at fault and responsible, and they've filled in by the Federal Reserve and the Treasury and giving income to people, $1,200 checks, the PPP and all of that, to the tune of almost $6 trillion when you add it all up over time. But the real person who broke this is China. The way they handled the coronavirus, the way they let it out without admitting to the world what was going on, bringing the world in, they're the ones culpable. They're the ones that must pay for this. And we've got to have a strategic approach to getting China to help pay to rebuild this. That's the focus.
Kevin, we'll have you back on the show another time to talk about that. Last thing, how do people get more access to you? Your Twitter feed, how to get access to your books? You wrote the original textbook on this. How do people get to it?
EconomicWarRoom.com is the one-stop shop. It's got links to our Twitter feed, Facebook, YouTube page, XOTV page, all our social media. So it's EconomicWarRoom.com.
Kevin, thank you very much. Great American patriot. Honored to have you on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Kevin Freeman, at the tip of the spear of economic war. And that's where we're in a hot war with the Chinese Communist Party. Jack Maxey and I will come. Jack will join me for some commentary, observation, analysis. We return on War and Pandemic. Committee on the President, Dangerous Special. Back in a moment.